Thank you so much for joining me today, Clashers. Today we're going to be going over the 2v2 tier list, the best cards and the worst cards, and ranking them all in order for 2v2. I've been working on this video for over a month, getting prepared to make sure that I give you the best list possible. Hope you enjoy. Okay guys, so this video is a little bit different than some of my previous tier lists. I hope that you enjoy it. Now, we're talking 2v2, and we're not talking about tournament standards or anything like that. These are kind of like ladder, where the rarity of the card and how dependent a certain card is on its level really plays a big role into how good that card is used, or how well it is for the current meta. So we're, of course, paying attention to different rarity and level dependency when it comes to ranking these different cards. And we're not talking about the ladder, we're not talking about challenges. So it's all strictly 2v2, as if 2v2 was just as important as ladder, because to some of you guys, it really is. Now, I don't actually have any win rates or use rates for this video. StatsRoyale.com hasn't been tracking them. They're going to be doing that in the future, from what I hear. But I gathered a group of some of the most skilled players in my Discord server, brought them all together. We had a really big discussion on all of the cards in the list for over a week, trying to pinpoint all of the cards and figure out exactly where they lie. So I think that this is going to be a very accurate list, and I'll probably make some corrections and stuff as we do get stats later on. Let's go ahead and start off with the S tier. These are the excellent cards for 2v2. These are either because they're just extremely versatile, because they're really good and easy to level up, or just because they're good for the current meta when it comes to 2v2. First of all, we have Log and Zap. Those are pretty self-explanatory. Don't really need to go into those too much. We also do have Tornado. Tornado doesn't really matter what level it is too much, and you can get lots of value using Tornado in 2v2, which is why it's a great card to be using. It's easier to Tornado miners and goblin barrels to your tower, and even hog riders in 2v2, so I think that the Tornado definitely deserves that S tier. We also do have the Rocket. Now, the Rocket provides an insane amount of value, and in 2v2, that's the one meta where I actually do think that Rocket cycle has a place in the meta. It's actually a solid win condition. If you play it right, and you have an opponent that has a deck that can really, or not an opponent, I'm used to saying opponent over and over again. If you have a companion, a friend, a teammate that has a good deck that can help support you while you're cycling to that Rocket. And it just provides so much value. So I think it's a really great card for 2v2. Then we also have Poison. Poison actually is in the S tier, whereas Fireball isn't in the S tier, and the reason why is because Poison just does such a good job of providing a massive area of denial for so many cards. You can oftentimes get more value on a Poison, even if it's not leveled up as high as your Fireball is. That being said, Fireball, you might be able to level up your Fireball higher, and so there might be times when Fireball is more useful than Poison, but I think a lot of times Poison is definitely considered an S tier card for the 2v2. Then we also have the Executioner, an epic card and an epic troop. He survives lightning, and because of that, and he survives Fireball. Because of that, the Executioner really is good even when he's not super over leveled. You can have an Executioner in your deck, and maybe he's not leveled up super high, but he can do so great, provide so much value in 2v2 because of his splash damage. 2v2 is very different than the regular tournament or regular matches because the area of effect really influences things a lot. So he's definitely in there. And then I also have the Knight in there, simply because the Knight is just such a versatile defense and offense in so many different situations. He's a common, so he's easy to level up there, and just a great card to be in this this S tier. Now let's go ahead and talk about the A tier. These are cards that are very good. They don't necessarily define the meta when it comes to 2v2, but they're important to be at least aware of. First of all, we have the primary win conditions: Golem, Giant, Hog Rider, and Miner. All of these win conditions are very good cards to be using in 2v2. The best ones, honestly. I would recommend choosing one of these cards and sticking with it when it comes to building a deck. Now, Golem, I do think it's important that you have a highly leveled Golem, and Miner it doesn't have to be super leveled. The reason why Miner does such a good job in 2v2 is because it's harder to defend against a Miner than it is, say, a Hog Rider. A Hog Rider, you can almost guarantee that you're going to see that your opponent is going to have some type of a defense for Hog Rider. So that's why the Miner is in there as a legendary card. Then we also have the Pekka. Now the Pekka, I would consider the Pekka a win condition. She maybe isn't going to be a win condition, so to speak, in a 2v2, simply because it's even harder to get her to the tower, unless your opponent, or unless your teammate is really good at helping you support the Pekka to get to the tower, but most of the time she's not that great on offense, but she really thrives in defense. There are a lot of tanks in 2v2, heavy tanks like the Golem and the Giant, and the Pekka just does such a great job at stopping that, and a lot of times you can even just use the Pekka on defense, and then go on an offense on the other lane and just let her die or whatever, and still get a lot of value out of her. That's not always the best option, but you get where I'm coming from. Then we have Fireball and Lightning. Fireball and Lightning, great value in 2v2. Very good options to be using. The Lightning especially, just so much value. You can just get so much damage on the tower, and a lot of times in 2v2, that final high damaging spell really makes or breaks the match for you. Then we have some good defenders here, the Inferno Tower and then the Mini Pekka. Both rare cards, so good ones to have leveled up to the point that you can use them in the 2v2. I like the Inferno Tower because we do see a lot of tanks in here, and I like the Mini Pekka for those Hog Riders and those Miners, and some other win conditions as well. Then we have these other support cards, the Mega Minion, Baby Dragon, really good cards for air to take care of those ground offenses and things like that, but also to defend against air troops. I like the Baby Dragon because of its splash damage. Then we have the Archers, Minions, Goblin Gang, and then also the Ice Spirit. Just overall very good cards to be using. Most of these are commons, which means that it's easy to level them up to a competitive standard. You're most likely playing some of these in your ladder deck anyways, and as such you're going to have them leveled up high enough to where you can have a competitive edge against your opponents. Not your teammates, your opponents. That's right. Now we have the B tier. These are good cards to use. These are not bad options. A lot of people think that these are just bad cards when I say that they're B tier, but no. They're good. They're good cards. They just either fit into specific types of decks, or maybe there are some cards that are a little bit better than them, but in the right deck, some of the best decks will have some good B tier cards to help balance out that deck. First of all, we do have Graveyard, Goblin Barrel, and the Battle Ram. These are B tier. These are B tier win conditions. It wouldn't be a Kairos video without some sort of a stutter saying something wrong like that. Hashtag Spagheletons. Okay, these cards are good win conditions, but a lot of times it's a lot more difficult to get value using these cards than in other metas. It's more difficult to be able to land a Goblin Barrel onto a tower and not have it zapped to death or have it logged to death. It's a lot harder to get a Battle Ram to land onto the tower. In fact, Battle Ram may even be considered a C tier. Graveyard as well, you really have to have a companion or a teammate really help you build up a good push and then use that Graveyard, take advantage of their deck. So in the right deck, I think that these cards could be very good, but overall, good cards to have. Giant Skeleton is normally an F tier card when it comes to the competitive and also the ladder, but for 2v2 the Giant Skeleton offers a lot of defense, and I love seeing the Giant Skeleton in 2v2, especially when paired up with cards like Tornado or things like that, where you can just stop an entire push with just a 6 elixir card. I mean, you can have all of their masses coming and just use that Giant Skeleton. Is he a great offense? No, he's really not a great offense, but a good card to have in your deck if you want to use the Giant Skeleton and you have him leveled up to a good point. Then we have Arrows and Fire Spirits. Now, Arrows are a good spell to be using. Fire Spirits, they're not a spell, but some consider them kind of to be like a spell. I like the Fire Spirits as well. Easy to level up, so yeah. Then we have some splash damaging, kind of medium heavy troops. We have the Bowler, the Dark Prince, and then the Wizard. Now the Wizard, normally I actually rank lower in competitive and ladder tiers, but because you can level him up to you can level him up at least to the point where he's not going to get fireballed in one shot, and if you can do that, The fact that he does splash damage actually really is great in that it gives him a spot in some decks. Whereas Executioner I do think is a lot better, but the Wizard does have a good situation where he does a lot more damage. Then we also have the Bowler, which pushes troops back, and now the Dark Prince, since his buff and the fact that he does some splash damage, really does help him out when it comes to building up a nice push, where it's just difficult for your opponent to stop that. So that's really nice. We also have the Tombstone. Good to be using, especially because you do see a lot of Hog Riders in 2v2, but maybe not necessarily the best defensive troop. We also have these legendaries here, the Elektra Wizard, the Night Witch, Ice Wizard, Princess, and then the Bandit. All of them are legendaries. They typically fit into higher tiers in the ladder or in competitive matches, but they fit here because they're legendaries, difficult to level up. The Elektra Wizard is one that I know a lot of people are going to comment on here. He just dies to Fireball. It's so easy to have a Fireball leveled up high enough to be strong enough to take out an Elektra Wizard in one shot. And so if you run the Elektra Wizard in 2v2, chances are really high that you're just going to be giving your opponent value. And he just doesn't work that great in 2v2. Honestly, there are better support cards to be using, even though he's an S tier card in competitive challenges. Then we also have the Musketeer, Dark Goblin, the Ice Golem, Bats, and then the Goblins that are all pretty, they're good cards to be using in 2v2. Yeah, one note about the Bats, I think the Bats are a really great card in other metas, but the Bats it's just so easy to defend against them, and they just don't offer as much value in 2v2, where it's super easy where it's very likely that your opponent's gonna have something like Zap or something to get rid of them. Let's go ahead and talk about the C tier. The C tier are the cards that are fair. They're like, okay. You can make them work in some decks, but they're usually better options, but they're not the worst. First of all, Lava Hound and Balloon. Now, these are good win conditions in other decks, but for 2v2, it is just it's so likely that your opponent, either one of your opponents, is going to have some type of good counter to the Lava Hound and the Balloon. And it's just hard to get value out of these cards in 2v2. It just really is. You're better off going off with some other win condition in most situations. Same thing with the Three Musketeers. It's very likely that your opponent is going to be rocking Poison, Fireball, Lightning, or the Rocket. Or that you're going to be facing two people that will have more than one of those. And as such, the Three Musketeers, they just struggle. They really do. The Mortar, now it is incredibly difficult to get a siege deck to actually land hits onto the tower in 2v2. I've tried. I love playing siege in the ladder. Expo is my primary win condition. It's a level 7, which for an epic is just crazy, and I just avoid it in 2v2. It just sucks. Mortar does have one perk over the Expo though in 2v2, and that's the fact that it can do some splash damage on defense. So the Mortar's not an awful option. It's not the worst of the worst. There are some better cards that you can be using, but you get where I'm saying. He does have one thing over the Expo. Then we have the Royal Giant and the Elite Barbarians. They work well. They're higher leveled, or they work better when they're higher leveled against your opponent, but it's likely that one of your opponent's going to be able to have some type of a counter against them. And so it's that they work okay. If you have them over leveled, I think they could be a B or even A tier cards to be using. Then we have the Heal Spell and the Freeze Spell, kind of gimmicky cards, kind of high skill, high reward if you're good at using them at the right time. I mean, I've played some 2v2 matches with some people that will freeze at just the perfect time. We totally annihilate our opponents. But most people, these just aren't the greatest cards to be using. There are other spells to be using. We have Bomb Tower, the Furnace, and the Defensive Cannon. All three of these are defenses that you can use. The Bomb Tower actually is not an awful card to be using in 2v2 like it is in other arenas. In fact, Bomb Tower could be considered a B tier card if you have a deck that is engineered for it to be useful, where you have a deck and your not opponent, your companion, I always say companion, your teammate is probably the best thing to say, would be able to, you have two decks to work off to each other and you have one that's primarily defensive. The Bomb Tower could get some value in that type of situation. We have the Inferno Dragon and Lumberjack. These cards are good, but they're legendaries and it's difficult to level them up high enough to the point where you can actually use them. Inferno Dragon may be borderline B tier card where it could be useful if you have it leveled up high enough. But I do think that the Inferno Tower is usually a little bit more consistent. But Inferno Dragon, maybe B tier. Lumberjack, I think he's solid C tier. Then we have the Guards, Witch, Skeleton Army, Valkyrie Minion Horde, the Barbarians, the Bomber, and the Skeletons, all of which are, they tend to be outshined by other cards when it comes to 2v2. There's also, it's just difficult to get a lot of value out of, especially out of like Guards, Skeleton Army, and the Barbarians, and the Minion Horde. There's so much area removal, AoE damage, splash damage in 2v2 that it's just hard to get value out of these cards. It really is. Okay, F tier. These are the poor cards. These ones, they're just not good for 2v2. They just aren't. Sparky. I know some people are gonna be in the comments. They're gonna be like, no, Sparky's the best card ever. Sparky is not the best card ever. I'm sorry. You could make Sparky work if you and your friend built decks to make Sparky work out. But even then, you're not going to consistently win against your opponent. It's just too easy for you. It's very likely that your opponent's going to have Zap and Elektra Wizard and Lightning to get and Rocket to get rid of Sparky. It's not a good card to be using in 2v2. Also the Expo. This is so sad to me. I really wish that you could use Expo very well in 2v2 because then I wouldn't have to have a deck for ladder and a deck for 2v2, but it does. So since I play Expo in the ladder, then I have to have another win condition for 2v2. So that's unfortunate, but it's just hard to make it work out. Even if you have a deck built around it, it's just not. I mean, you can make it work out, but consistently, not very well. Then we also have the Prince and the Cannon Cart. Just not very great. Now, Cannon Cart may be borderline C tier, where you could get some value out of it if you have a primarily defensive deck that goes on to counter pushes, but it's just not that great. We also have Rage, Clone, and the Mirror. Also, gimmicky cards, kind of fun to mess around with, but they're just not that great in 2v2. Now, the Elixir Collector. I know that there are going to be some people who are going to be like, no, I use Elixir Collector in 2v2. Just stop. Every time I'm playing with somebody and they play a pump, I'm like, why? Why did you bring this into your 2v2 deck? And don't get me wrong, I love the Elixir Collector. The Elixir Collector is one of my favorite cards to include in almost all of my decks. But for 2v2, you are just giving your opponent value. It is so likely that they're going to have Poison, Fireball, Lightning, Rocket, that you're just going to give them value and damage onto your tower. It's the Elixir Collector. If it gave Elixir to you and your teammate, there I used teammate right, then it would be a good card to use. But where it's just to you, it forces your teammate to really have to defend, cover the fact that you've done that, and it just doesn't make for great it's not a good card in 2v2. I'm so sorry, but it's just not. It's not. I tried. It's not. Don't use it. Don't use it. Especially if you're going into random matches, and I'm playing random matches, just don't use it. Even if you put it in your deck and you're playing with me, don't use the Elixir Collector. Okay, then we have the Barbarian Hut, Spear Goblin Hut, and then we also have the Tesla. I don't think I need to say anything about them. And then the Spear Goblins as well. Just not very great cards, and yeah, they're just not great cards. There's so much splash that those huts are not going to give any value, and the Tesla just does not deal enough damage. It would be cool if the Tesla had like a dual, either like kind of like an arc like the Elektra Wizard where it zaps 2 things at once, or it like actually stuns things. The Elektra Wizard does that for 4 Elixir. I don't see why the Tesla Tower for 4 Elixir couldn't also do something like that. I mean, it's useless, except for the lower arenas. Lower arenas, Tesla's okay, but high arenas, competitive challenges, 2v2, Tesla just is F tier in all 3 of them, so that's unfortunate. Make sure you check out my collaborators, guys, and like and subscribe, comment for more. Tell me what you think about this, if you agree with it, disagree with it. Also, if you want to join the discussion on actually ranking these cards, make sure you join my Discord server. There's a link in the description below so that you can actually come in, and when I'm ready to start working on these tier lists, I actually grab a lot of collaborators, bring them on there so that these tier lists are the best out there for all viewers. And I'd love to have you join. If you think you're a competitive player and you have what it takes to really add to the discussion, I'd love to have you on there. Thank you so much for watching. This is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in the arena.